Hi, my name is Nate, and I am not here to waste your time. Some folks have said we've lost decency in society, but that one's a hard one for me because who's to say what's decent or indecent? And as I sat on it, I realized that's close. But our real loss isn't decency, it's coherence. Coherence is just, it describes things that hold together. Incoherence describes things that fall apart. If it feels like everything is falling apart, it's because we've let incoherence gain an unreasonable amount of purchase in today's society. We've let it exist in frames of reference where like it doesn't belong. I think like you, I have been paralyzed by the complete effing deterioration of pretty much everything in the whole entire world. It doesn't matter where you look, things are falling apart. And when I try to make sense of it, I see a lot of people who are offering suggestions about what might be behind it, but I'm not really satisfied by any of them. And as I started to pull that thread, I got more and more convinced that our biggest battle right now isn't left versus right, blue versus red. It's coherence versus incoherence. And for me, that's a story that I start in 2017 when Kellyanne Conway got on Meet the Press with Chuck Todd, and they were arguing about Trump's inauguration audience. And she came on and introduced the entire world to alternative facts. And that was the first moment that I realized that truth didn't really seem to matter anymore. You fast forward just a little bit to 2021 and the insurrection and all the stuff that was involved in that. And I realized that governance doesn't really seem to matter. Fast forward to 2025 and Trump 2.0, oh my God. And we see family separations get way more intense than we saw even before. And that told us communities didn't matter. And once I started doing all of this math, I realized that that's a bucket that's big enough to explain what feels so wrong about this moment. It's that we have let incoherence come into every part of our everyday lives. We've allowed ourselves to exist in incoherent communities. We've allowed ourselves to participate in incoherent communication. We've allowed both our leaders and the companies that we work for and buy stuff from to behave in incoherent ways. We've cast votes for incoherent leaders. So as I kept pulling on these threads, it started to coalesce that really there might be a lot of merit in us exploring whether or not prioritizing coherent communications, coherent communities, and coherent governance might get a lot of progress to addressing this moment. And that might sound really pie in the sky, but let me kind of explain how I got there, and it might start to make a little more sense. As you might guess, I'm talking to you from one of the corners of the United States. And I spend a lot of time in this corner just kind of thinking about like 330 million Americans. Is that just like too large for us to like agree on things? Like, is there a chance that 330 million people just like cannot align on things? That is a possibility. But if we reject that for the moment, and I say, well, let's take for granted that they can align, on what would we align? And I start to imagine this conceptual person in the other corner of the country, a person who's as different from me as I can imagine. But then I start to say, well, what does that person and I, what do they have in common with me? And the answer was very, very clear very quickly. I've worked all over the world, dozens of countries, all sorts of different continents, doing some pretty intense work. I've talked to people in all of these countries, and the conversation always kind of lands in the same place when I just sort of try to figure out like what's meaningful to my cab driver, my Uber driver. It's really simple. And I think it's what almost everybody wants out of any given day. They want to wake up. They want to do something at which they have some natural aptitude. They want to be recognized for that effort, ideally with money, and then they want to use the proceeds of that effort to enrich their own life and the lives of the people around them. And that's it. And you can put all sorts of lipstick on that pig if you want, but it's pretty simple. Wake up, do a thing you don't suck at, be recognized and rewarded for that effort, and live a better life. Hopefully helping other people do that meanwhile. Coherence is just, it describes things that hold together. Incoherence describes things that fall apart. If it feels like everything is falling apart, it's because we've let incoherence gain an unreasonable amount of purchase in today's society. We've let it exist in frames of reference where like it doesn't belong. We have let it stand next to legitimate things, illegitimate as it is. there's an okay chance that if we can get past left versus right, red versus blue, flat earth versus round earth, honestly, we might start to have a more productive conversation if we can have one around coherence and incoherence. I want to cohere with the people around me. I want to cohere with the person in the other corner of the country. I want to turn on the news and have it make sense. I want to vote for politicians who will actually behave in accordance with the things that they say. I want to exist in civic groups with people who don't believe nearly the same things as me, but in a context where that so doesn't matter. And what's wild is that, of course, polarities are profitable. The news organizations, the media companies, they sell advertisements to everybody, the left and the right, the up versus the down. They don't care. They want it frothy. Of course they do. We could spend literally the rest of our lives talking about the things that are different between us, but that list would never end. It's infinite. There's 8.5 billion people on this planet and growing. What might be a lot more productive is if we start with the premise of saying, to the extent we possibly can, let's get rid of every other affiliation we have and start with an affiliation with coherence. That is to say, attaching ourselves to things that hold together. Be that ideas that hold together, communities that hold together, workplaces that hold together. Because every time we stand next to incoherence and we just let it persist, we give it a chance to multiply. We give it a chance to become more legitimate. We give it a chance to replace what we so badly need instead of it, which is coherence. Coherence, it's things attaching to each other. It's not adherence, one thing attaching to another. It's mutual. It goes in a lot of different directions. I don't think most people want conflict. I don't think most people want shitty or acrimonious days. I think people want coherent lives, coherent homes and communities. All of this is to say that I have felt an incredible amount of disembodied rage at almost everything I've seen for several years now. Back in the early 2000s, I was studying marketing as an undergraduate, and it freaked me the hell out when they started talking about how we can use fear and insecurities to help people sell cosmetics. That was the beginning of the integrated marketing era, where it was revolutionary if we could get a postcard in your mailbox at the same time as we could get an email in your inbox. And that only paved the way for the attention economy to take literally every shred of extra cognitive capacity we have. I have some pretty wild ideas about what the future could look like if we're willing to jettison some of our preconceptions and some of our first attachments. If there's a chance that we can blow open our conceptions about like what a thing must look like, we might be really, really surprised at the kind of soil that we can turn over. I've put together a little site, and you might be confused if you look at it at first. But at coherence.party, I've started to put together a lot of the ideas that have really been starting to feel most coherent. They're ideas that over the last few years have felt like the smallest lifeline toward a future that is less this. There have been times where I have wanted to shout. There have been times where I've wanted to weep. There have been times where I've wanted to do that in the same breath. I don't think anybody doubts that humans are capable of a better world. I don't think anybody doubts that we are more inclined toward feeding each other than killing each other. Especially in the age of AI. Hospitality is the hallmark of humanity. Extending our hand to other people, that's the one thing that the machines will never replace. There's a lot of other things the machines will never replace, but that's a different video. My hope is that if we are to work our way through and out of this moment, we can liberate ourselves from the kinds of polarities and paradigms and fucked up structures that have got us to this moment. There's a lot to say about this. And if you find your way to Coherence Party, that's coherence.party, you'll see that I've put my first 20 pillars of what I think would go a long way of addressing this. But I want to be really clear, that's just version 1. Every 6 months, I hope to publish new versions of everything that's on there, incorporating the best ideas and feedback from anybody who is gracious enough to take the time to offer it. You'll notice at the bottom of most pages, there's a really neat little box where you can put some feedback. It's powered by this group, the Computational Democracy Project. I'll have links. It's an extraordinary organization that powers a different kind of conversation. I'm going to be around for a while here. I've been quiet for the last 10 or 12 years. I left Facebook when Zuckerberg fucked up the newsfeed and it stopped being chronological. And this is my first major contribution to social media since. My hope is that by being off of social media for as long as I have, by watching the world lose its freaking mind in the process, I've potentially gotten just enough of a vantage point to suggest that, like, there might be a path out of this. If there's a path out of this, and I'm going to argue there is, it is paved with coherence. It's paved with us taking every moment we run into incoherence and doing whatever we can to diffuse it, to defeat it, to starve it of oxygen. This is just the beginning. But if anything I've said here is resonating, I do hope you'll find your way to coherence.party. Throw some of your ideas at the bottom of those pages. I'm really interested to see where this could go.